Colleen Atwood's brilliant Victorian-inspired designs bring Tim Burton's 2007 film Sweeney Todd to life. This is one of my favorite movies, and although I don't consider myself a cosplayer, I really enjoyed creating a screen-accurate cosplay of Mrs. Lovett, the enterprising and maniacal baker driven by unrequited love. In this video, I'll talk about how I do my hair and makeup for my Mrs. Lovett cosplay. I'll show you all the details of this costume, and I'll give you tips on how to make this cosplay yourself. Let's start by prepping the hair. I used a vintage style wet set to give my hair some texture and volume. The day before I wore my cosplay, I dampened my hair with a mixture of setting lotion and water, and then set my hair in foam rollers, with the rollers facing away from my forehead and down towards my neck. Because I'm going for a messy hairstyle, I wasn't precise with my rolling pattern. I also used different sizes of rollers so that I could achieve uneven, messy curls. After about 12 hours with the rollers in, I carefully removed them. Sleeping on foam rollers like this is always a pain, but my hair is so thin and straight that there's no other way to achieve this hairstyle. Because my hair is so fine, it easily gets tangled in the plastic bits of the rollers. Ouch! Very important step, I took a moment to enjoy how silly I looked with these tight ringlets. And now a much-deserved sip of coffee. I'm going to borrow a trick from 18th century hairstyling and dust some cornstarch onto my hair. Because Mrs. Lovett's hair in the Tim Burton film looks dusty, almost as if it's grayed or has bits of flour in it, I want to use the cornstarch to make my hair look a bit grayed and less shiny. This will also help add some volume because it acts like a dry shampoo. Then I start gently separating the ringlets into more curls. With a hairbrush, I continue to gently separate the curls. I want to achieve a voluminous, frizzy mass of hair, just like Mrs. Lovett's. I'm going to repeat the process of brushing out the curls and separating the curls with my fingers until all the curls have been fully separated into fine strands. My hair is starting to look like a nice 1940s style brush out now, which means it's almost time to fully mess it up. I think this method of hairstyling would also work if you're trying to cosplay Claire Fraser from the Outlander series. It's an easy, if time-consuming way to achieve lots of curly hair when your hair is very straight and fine. Mrs. Lovett's hair appears to be brushed up and back at the forehead, with falling tendrils on the sides of her head. To achieve this look, I part my hair in a C shape from crown to temples, and then gently tease that section of hair. I softly pull it back, leaving a poof, and then add some pins to help keep the poof in place. Then I take one half of my hair, gently pull it upwards, and pin it to the crown of my head so that the curls fall towards my ears. This is a great trick for both adding volume at the top of your head and mimicking a shorter haircut. I separate and mess up the curls some more, pushing them towards my face. Then I repeat the same process on the other side, gathering up the hair, pulling it upwards, and pinning it to the crown of my head. With my fingers, I messed up some more curls and placed them where they would fill in any gaps. I pin up any dangling strands or curls. The messier the better. The key to this look is to keep messing up those curls, keep separating the strands of hair until you get that halo of frizzy hair. In some promotional images, Mrs. Lovett's hair is curly, in some it's a bit straight and crimped, but I found this to be the best method for getting what her hair looks like most of the time. The finishing touch is an extra dusting of cornstarch. I have a heart-shaped hairline and a widow's peak, so to mimic Helena Bonham Carter's face shape, I'm applying brown eyeshadow to my upper temples to fill in my hairline. This step isn't necessary, but I was trying to look as much like Tim Burton's version of Mrs. Lovett as possible. And that's all for the hairstyle. Time to work on the makeup. I start by adding some concealer under my eyes and on my eyelids. This is a sample I got at a department store makeup counter. Now I add some primer to my eyelids. This is Urban Decay Primer Potion. I also add primer underneath my eyes, as I'll be applying lots of makeup there in a moment. I apply almost all of my makeup gently with the tip of my finger, as that's always what felt comfortable and effective to me. Next, I'm using some very worn out eyebrow pencil to enhance the arch shape of my eyebrows. To further encourage my eyebrows into Helena Bonham Carter's arched eyebrow shape, I brush my eyebrows upwards. I add some sheer matte face powder, this one is by Bare Minerals, and I make sure to blend the powder onto my neck. To make my face look pale, I apply a light dusting of cornstarch. A cursory Google search showed that this wasn't dangerous, but I recommend testing this on a small patch of skin before applying to your face, in case you experience some kind of reaction to the cornstarch. I tap off the excess cornstarch powder onto my hand before applying. You could also just use a lighter shade of face powder or foundation to achieve that paler skin tone. Now it's time for smoky eyes. First, I applied this dark brown matte shade of eyeshadow all over my eyelid. I'm not worried that the color looks a bit patchy because we'll be blending and applying more shades over this. This matte brown is just a base. I make sure to concentrate the color on my crease. This will help emphasize Mrs. Lovett's appearance of sunken eyes. In the beginning of the film, Mrs. Lovett's face looks sunken, almost ill, which makes sense as she's probably on the brink of starvation with her failing pie shop. I'm not a makeup artist, skilled, or professional by any means. These are just my easy makeup tricks for achieving Mrs. Lovett's appearance. I blend the eyeshadow up to my eyebrows and then apply a small amount of the matte brown eyeshadow underneath my eyes. I'm following the natural hollows and lines under my eyes to create the illusion of dark circles. I have deep set eyes, so this area is a bit purplish anyway, but I want to emphasize that darkness. With that same shade of brown eyeshadow, I suck in my cheeks and outline the hollows of my cheekbones. We'll blend this out to achieve Mrs. Lovett's gaunt face look. Is this what the cool kids call contouring? Mrs. Lovett has some redness under her eyes, which I'll mimic by applying red lipstick along my lower lash line with a cotton swab. Then with the clean end of the cotton swab, I blend out the red. With some blush applied on a cotton swab, I deepen the effect of those dark under-eye circles. I'm going to repeat this process with a dark purple lipstick, layering it over the red lipstick on my lower lash line. You could of course use a creamy eyeshadow instead of lipstick, but I like the challenge of using what I already have on hand for my cosplays. My eyebrows are still looking a bit thin and patchy, so to get Mrs. Lovett's thick, dark eyebrows, I'm adding some dark brown eyeshadow to my brows. Next, I add black eyeshadow to my crease, again to emphasize the darkness and depth that Mrs. Lovett's eyes have. And a smidge of black eyeshadow under my eyes, blended to create those dark circles. I'm applying some matte neutral colored lipstick. This one is Ophelia by Kat Von D. Throughout the film, Mrs. Lovett's lips are actually a nude color rather than red. And finally, some good old black eyeliner and mascara. And that's how to get a screen-accurate makeup look for Mrs. Lovett. Now it's time to get dressed in all the garments that make up this cosplay. I chose to recreate the outfit that Mrs. Lovett wears throughout most of the film. I start with these fun black and red striped thigh-high socks, which are fairly screen-accurate. In promotional images, Mrs. Lovett is shown wearing dark red Edwardian-style combinations and a black corset. But these never appear in the film, so I didn't bother making them. Instead, I wore a short lace-trimmed petticoat. I usually wear this one as an underpetticoat with my Victorian outfits. To make the skirt, I used the Truly Victorian 101 bustle petticoat pattern. Because I wanted a skirt, not a bustle, I didn't add the boning. I only made 3 ruffles along the back, added a ruffle around the hem, and widened the waistband. I love the neat finish of the placket and the pleats at the front of the skirt. The skirt fabric is a cotton print from Joann's, which I dipped in tea and coffee grounds to darken it. It was really difficult to find a screen-accurate fabric as Mrs. Lovett's skirt looks brown, blue, or black depending on the scene. The skirt ruffles are bound in strips of red cotton, which we can see faintly in promotional images. I actually didn't have enough fabric for this skirt. I only ordered 2 yards, so most of the skirt is actually smaller pieces of fabric stitched together like a quilt. It's really only visible when the skirt is inside out. Most of the work in creating this cosplay went into making the bodice, as there are so many details in Colleen Atwood's design. In this interview with Colleen Atwood, we see that there are curved seams at the back of the bodice. I drafted my bodice pattern to have curved seams at the back and darts at the front. The bodice is made of a gold brocade fabric layered with a beaded black mesh to mimic the color and texture of the original bodice. The sleeves of the bodice are also layered. When Mrs. Lovett's sleeves are pushed up, we can see that the outer, sheer black layer gathers differently from the striped inner layer. To achieve this, I layered black chiffon over a striped fabric. Layering a dark, sheer fabric over another fabric like this is a great way to give your fabric more depth and texture. The bodice fastens with 2 snaps and 2 antique Victorian black buttons. Inspired by Victorian sewing techniques, the front edges of the bodice are finished with a wide facing that was stitched down by hand for an invisible finish. Mrs. Lovett has a sheer red ruffle attached to either her bodice or undergarments. I chose to simplify this by stitching some strips of gathered red tulle to the inside of the bodice, and tucking an additional red tulle frill into the neckline after I put the bodice on. In the interview with Colleen Atwood, we see that the bodice has a peplum, but I didn't want to fuss with drafting a peplum, so instead I created a vent in the curved back seams. The bottom and top edges of the bodice are bound in bias tape made from the sheer black fabric. This finish doesn't add any extra bulk, like a thicker cotton bias binding would. I stitched the binding to the right side of the fabric with a sewing machine and felled down the binding by hand on the inside of the bodice. Along the bottom edge of the bodice, the binding is covered with a strip of gathered black chiffon. The frayed edges of this ruffle help add to the weathered and worn-out look of this costume. The top edge of Mrs. Lovett's bodice is decorated with a scalloped lace and star-shaped silver beads. I used a scrap of very damaged but beautiful antique lace on my bodice. Normally, I feel squeamish about using antique things, but this lace was so ruined, full of holes and stains. When I bought this lace on eBay, it was already cut into several pieces, and the 2 smaller pieces worked perfectly for decorating the sleeves. A row of silver, star-shaped beads was sewn by hand along the neckline. The detail in this bodice extends to the sleeves, where there appears to be a short sleeve layered over the striped sleeve. This short sleeve has a scalloped edge, which I finished off with some more black chiffon bias binding. A small ruffle made of the black chiffon fabric is stitched on over the scalloped edge. A lot of hand sewing went into this bodice, but these details are so finicky that attempting them on a sewing machine would have been really frustrating for me. Over her bodice, Mrs. Lovett appears to be wearing some kind of waist cincher or Swiss waist type garment, rather than a corset. I drafted the pattern for my waist cincher / corset, whose design was made up of several shaped panels sewn together and lightly stiffened with plastic zip ties. My corset is made from black cotton with an inner strength layer of cotton canvas and a lining of black polyester satin. I added a gathered black chiffon frill to the top edge of the corset as well. Each seam is decorated with white top stitching. I'm not sure if this is exactly how the original costume was made, but the white stitching was the easiest way to approximate that design. With this cosplay, I wear my black American Duchess Gibson shoes. These are actually reproduction early 1900s style shoes, and one of my favorite shoes to wear for any occasion. Promotional images show Mrs. Lovett wearing late Victorian-style boots, but these are never visible in the film, so a simple classic black heel or flat shoe should do. Throughout most of the film, Mrs. Lovett wears fingerless net gloves, an accessory which was really popular during the mid-19th century. From a Halloween store, I bought black mesh costume gloves that had a ruffle at the wrist. I simply cut off the wrist ruffle and the fingertips of the gloves to make Victorian-style mitts. I really enjoyed making this cosplay, and I have so much fun wearing it. I love how all the colors and textures come together in this iconic costume. Now I'm ready to bake up some morally questionable pies. Tell me in the comments below what is your favorite movie costume design, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like.